National Taxpayer Union has some problems with it, too. And we're now joined by Demian Brady. And Demian, good to have you back on the program here. A lot of times, you look and you got to sympathize with Speaker Mike Johnson. He's not trying to herd cats. He's trying to herd angry cats in an election year. So that's a challenge in and of itself. But that doesn't excuse, the bloated spending. I mean, I know that politics is politics, but what are some of the key problems that you all are seeing with what's out there right now?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me back on. There are some good things in these bills, but they could have gone a lot further to lock in some of those DOGE savings that you talked about. We've seen some funding being restored to programs that President Trump has essentially gutted, like the international radio broadcast systems, the Institute for Peace. I called over to the Institute for Peace last week or 2 weeks ago, and the building is just currently occupied by some security guards. There's nobody on staff there now, but I guess maybe Trump is going to use that for his Board of Peace. So that's why there's money in there for it. But on top of that, we're seeing earmarks back in a huge way. A couple of congressional offices reached out to help us just count and add up how many there are and how much they all cost, because there is some transparency, but it's lacking. It took a lot of work to go through hundreds of pages of PDFs and calculate over 7,600 earmarks, amounting to over $14 billion in congressionally directed spending to pork projects that override agency prerogatives and review processes for helping to figure out the best way to spend taxpayer dollars.
Demian, good morning. This is Susie Moore. Is there a pushback argument, a devil's advocate argument maybe, that, look, this is the best they can do right now to get the appropriations across the finish line and actually pass a budget in regular order, which they haven't done in 3 decades. And then after we're set up for fiscal year 2026, there's the opportunity to make moves via like a rescissions package?
Yeah, I mean, of course, these spending bills that we're seeing are a compromise product, as they have to work through very thin majorities in the House and the Senate. So that's why a lot of the stuff is crammed in here. But let's leave it up to the agencies to figure out the best way to use their evaluation process. And plus, we have a $38 trillion deficit. Instead of lawmakers figuring out the best way to direct taxpayer dollars, they should be holding the line on spending so that we're not burying future generations of taxpayers in more and more debt.
Well, and not to mention, that's one of the reasons Republicans were given the majority is because of that exact promise, Demian.
Right. And, and maybe with all these earmarks get crammed in there, maybe that makes it harder to get rescissions going forward. We saw President Trump revive this process of rescissions where the president will send a package to Congress, and there's a process where they have to vote on it within a certain period of time to either accept these rescissions, which is clawing back some funding that had been previously spent. So, I mean, this could make it harder going forward to do that, since so many members of Congress are going to have their pet projects potentially on the line in these things. So, the best thing to do now is to try to hold the line on this, and then, work to improve the budgetary process, make sure that the congressional committees are doing due diligence in making sure that the agencies that they have oversight power are conducting thorough reviews to make sure that agencies are spending money the best way possible and try to weed out waste and help to rein in the national debt.
From a practical standpoint, in the near term, and for the voters, what's the best message we should be getting to our elected representatives on this budgetary process in general and just on earmarks?
Yeah, we do have some transparency, but if there's going to be earmarks, it should be easier. It shouldn't be a scavenger hunt to try to figure out how much these are. Like I said, we had a couple of Hill staffers ask us for help because some of these earmarks are in documents that are hundreds and hundreds of pages long, and they don't provide an automatic tally. So I had to go through, and you can't just copy the data from the documents that come from the appropriations committees and put them into a spreadsheet. The formatting is all messed up. So you have to spend a lot of time to clean up the data and try to figure out what's in there. So that there should be easier transparency. And Congress, instead of finding ways to spend more and more money, we got to be holding the line. We got to make incremental progress in a bipartisan way to help rein in the federal debt. But we also don't want a government shutdown, because that's a mess too. And there is legislation to help reform that as well that Congress could consider, so that way spending would continue in an automatic way while Congress figures out the top line budget numbers.
Okay, so the blog post that we're talking about here is saving the worst for last, thousands of earmarks in a spendy final appropriations minibus. And we'll tell you how to find that on National Taxpayer Union's website here in just a little bit. We're talking with Demian Brady right now. I know the politics is the art of the possible, and I know that politics is messy, and you got the sausage making comparisons and things like that. But this shouldn't be this hard. When you talked about, for instance, PDF, and you can't copy that, it's buried in thousands of pages. Okay, well, that means that there is an opaqueness that's intentional, either through the Republican majority Congress or through the Trump administration, his underlings at the very least, when the president had presented such an effective DOGE approach to getting rid of this spending. Why is this so freaking hard to get the concept through the bureaucrats, much less the elected officials? You don't have that much money. You can't spend that much money. The concept is simple. The application is, basically molecular science, apparently.
Yeah, we got to find ways to increase transparency. And we passed the tax reform bill last year on let people keep more of their money. And now the number one process, the number one priority going forward has to be reining in spending. We've been overspending for a century now, and has amounted up to $38 trillion in debt that we're kicking down the road to future generations of taxpayers, which means that they face lower economic growth, higher tax burdens. So we got to find incremental ways forward. And, we are seeing some bipartisanship here on all the spending, but we are also seeing, on a smaller scale, bipartisan efforts to lead reforms, to bring back a fiscal commission, to put all things on the table to help rein in spending and control the debt, and find reasonable paths towards fiscal targets that Congress can use to help slowly rein in the federal debt, so that way we can provide for a sustainable future.
This is probably a tall order and maybe not likely, particularly certainly in this year. But President Trump has hinted at trying to rethink, reimagine how we do our taxes, the overall tax system. Is that something, can we dream? Can we dare to dream about an overhaul of the way we tax?
Yeah, because that could affect and could control spending by default.
Right.
Right. Yeah, we'll have to see how that works out, because that would require a lot of buy-in from Congress. We did make some good progress on tax reform last year, reining in the burden, and beyond how much you end up paying in taxes, there's also a huge time burden as well. So some of these reforms just help save that opportunity cost that businesses and people spend worrying over files and forms, rather than other productive or more enjoyable pursuits. So we've seen progress on that, and every tax day we do our annual study of tax complexity, adding up the amount of billions of hours that go into tax preparation. So we'll update that, and hopefully we see some better numbers on behalf of taxpayers. We have seen some progress in the last couple of in Trump's first administration, before tax burdens started to grow again under President Biden.
All right, Demian, where do people find not just this blog post that I just referenced that we've been talking about, but follow your work otherwise? We should find that link. This is something they ought to be putting out on their social media as well, because frankly, the other side is really, really bad on this doesn't mean that we let up the pressure on our side to do the best that we can do. And frankly, I've been kind of disappointed. I was all excited about the progress being made with DOGE. I was very happy with the successes of the rescission, but we knew that those were fairly small potatoes compared to what's really out there. And I'm kind of disappointed in the progress that's being made to cut back that spending and increase that efficiency.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to President Trump's next budget proposal, which should be coming out in February or March, and hopefully there's some really good reforms that Congress can follow. You can check out our work at NTU.org, and I also have a related blog post called Tracking Congress's 2026 Earmarks, and I have summary tables there of how many earmarks are in all the bills, and there's a spreadsheet so people can look up and see how many of these members of Congress want to spend your tax dollars on pet projects.
All right. Thanks, Demian. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Demian.